What's going on, everybody? It's that time again. It's a Sooners Illustrated podcast, episode 28 on this Thursday, October 19th, 2023. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy, James E. Jackson, Tom Green will be along a little later. I warned you guys on Monday. If you tune in the Monday show, I warned you guys. I have nowhere to put my dogs during the show. My wife's out of town. They were great on Monday. We got an early bark in on the show today. Hopefully that's the last one. ZK, how you doing, man? We talked about it on Monday, but it feels like it's been forever since Oklahoma played a game. That Texas game feels like so long ago. Excited to see them back in action this weekend at home. UCF Knights in town. Should be a fun one. Homecoming weekend. Should be great weather. A lot to be excited about right now for an OU fan.
It feels like we're starting a whole new season. Like it's been that long, it feels like, since they've played a game. But yeah, I'm excited about it. Get another home game back in Norman to basically hit the second half of the year and get everyone re-energized for the final stretch. Crazy that we're here already, obviously, but there's a lot going on right now. Even during the bye week, college football provided a ton in regards to Oklahoma to discuss. So, yeah, man, I mean, recruiting's still rolling. We are at the midpoint of the season, basically, getting ready to go into the second half of the stretch. I'm looking forward to it, man. One of the best times of the year.
Oh, yeah. No, we talked about it a little on the Monday show, but the bye week coming right in the middle, it really feels like it's two halves. And Oklahoma was kind of this underdog, chip on their shoulder, trying to prove to everybody in the first half. Well, they did that with the Texas game. Now the second half of the season, they're the hunted. They're trying to, stay at the top, make the playoff, things like that. So it's going to be a fun second half of the season. Hopefully everybody joins along for the ride for us through the back half. Of course, on the show today, we'll be breaking down the UCF game, previewing what we think, matchups to watch, and we'll also give our score predictions as well, the two of us, along with Tom and James, just a little bit. But first, as we usually do on Thursday shows, we'll hit a little recruiting talk out of the gate. We got our lead recruiting analyst here with Collin, so we'll hit some of the latest things going into another home weekend for Oklahoma. A lot of visitors coming in, things like that. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, let's touch on the rankings update that came at the end of last week. The 2024 class got a readjustment on 24/7 Sports. Benefited a lot of OU guys. Saw themselves take a nice little jump. Basically, Collin, I'll just pose it to you this way for OU fans tuning in, listening. What should OU fans know about the rankings update last week? Who were some guys that saw good jumps for the Sooners that are committed? And just generally speaking, what did it do for OU in a positive way in terms of just kind of building up that 24 class?
Yeah, I think the way I wanted to start this discussion, Josh, is number one, I think anyone who is either new to the recruiting space or might even be more than familiar with it, but isn't fully aware of how all this works. Just a little quick refresher course. So I had someone on our board ask me, what is the difference between the composite and 24/7 Sports rankings? And so what you need to know first and foremost is that this was a 24/7 Sports specific rankings update. We control what we can control, and that is how we perceive these players. And so with that, the 24/7 Sports composite, you may have saw that get adjusted as well. The composite is a combination of all the four major recruiting sites. So then when that average is taken, it can obviously fluctuate based on how different sites see these certain players. And so for 24/7 Sports, our rankings were adjusted last week. That's why you saw so much fluctuation at the top of these player profiles whenever you pull them up at 247sports.com. And I think within the 2024 cycle, there were a few OU guys who earned some more than well-deserved recognition. And another thing to know, 24/7 Sports isn't just throwing out ratings willy-nilly throughout the year. We try to stick to a particular schedule, and right around this time of the year, it's almost like a quarterly basis. Right around this time of year is when our national scouting team makes the final call on a mid-season ranking type of situation. So through a lot of these guys' senior seasons, we now have further tape to break down and apply that to the rankings. I think the first guy I want to start with is Danny Okoye. So Okoye, the in-state edge rusher, he was a 3-star, and he's a darn good 3-star. The big thing, our scouting team, whenever we were going to get to the mid-season rankings update, I know our top guys in the scouting rankings committee wanted to see what Okoye looked like from a further development standpoint. He's been putting on a ton of weight. Athletic numbers are out there. But how does that apply to the field? further film. Obviously, he's playing homeschool competition, so there's still a lot more you have to go through in order to provide some sort of accurate rating.
Right.
He gets a 4-star, well-deserved. I think Okoye, from what I've heard, still has more than a chance to go up in the rankings as well. I wouldn't be surprised if he finds his way into the top 247 by the season's end rankings update. But Okoye getting his 4-star, and then another guy who I'll mention here in a second, that means that now at 247sports.com, every single Oklahoma defensive line commit is a 4-star or higher. And that's not only a huge development, but a huge testament to the work that's been put in by Brent Venables, by Todd Bates, by Miguel Chavis and the staff. I don't remember the last time I ever said that when we're talking about the recruiting class, but Okoye getting that 4-star, not only big for him, but big for this class, this commit group as well. Before I get to another one, though, I do want to mention one of the biggest jumpers across the entire cycle, and he is an Oklahoma commit. He is Eugene Brooks, the offensive lineman.
Yeah.
He was like a, if I remember correctly, he was an 88, maybe an 87, which is a mid to high 3-star rating in our system. And he goes from mid to high 3-star. Now Eugene Brooks is inside the top 175, which is huge. I was talking about this with someone the other day on the recruiting trail. I don't think people understand just how hard it is to be in like the top 150 to top 175 in the country. I mean, if you're a top 200 player in America, you're really damn good at what you do. And for Eugene Brooks, I think him jumping into the top 175, Josh, is another testament to what he's done. I mean, he's lost more than 60 pounds of weight. He was probably seen more as an interior offensive lineman, but he's got heavy hands. He's kind of that road grader style. And now that he's rebuilt his body, that push into the top 175, earning 4-star status, one of the biggest jumps across the cycle is because I think now you're looking at Eugene Brooks coming in to Oklahoma with legit 3-spot positional versatility. I mean, I think he can play both guard spots. And now I think he could have a legit shot if needed to play right tackle at the collegiate level, which is huge for someone like Eugene Brooks, who, again, just a couple months ago, before he reshaped his body and worked on his game even further, likely just an interior offensive line take. So really good to see Oklahoma get out in front of that one and get someone who's getting better and better. And then I'll wrap it up with this. I mentioned the defensive line stuff. Jaden Jackson, we've talked about this on the show.
Yeah.
I mean, we all kind of knew that he was going to jump. He was a 3-star at the time that they got him. It was kind of a foregone conclusion. He was going to become a 4-star at some point. The biggest thing with Jaden, too, him being at IMG Academy, getting a lot of exposure, a lot of game tape. On top of that, our director of scouting at 24/7 Sports, Andrew Ivins, lives in Florida, lives, I think, like 40 minutes from IMG Academy. He knows all this. Right. So our director of scouting was basically dialed into Jaden Jackson's development in the senior season. And I know one of the biggest goals for our scouting team was get this guy a very new, very accurate rating at the midseason point of the year. And that's exactly what's been accomplished. We saw it coming. It was kind of known it was going to happen, but he goes from 3-star to 4-star. He goes from outside the top 247 to, I believe, number 202 overall in our rankings. And again, this is another guy. These rankings aren't finalized. I want to reiterate that. But for our network, we want that midseason point, data point.
Sure.
And then we want to figure out where they truly are at the end of the year. And so for Jaden Jackson, for it to have been a foregone conclusion, he was going to rise and then get that done. I did it earlier. Why not double down? This feels like a guy who's going to continue to jump. And more data will be collected over the course of the remainder of the year. I think Jaden Jackson's playing some really good football. He's proven time and again why he is seen by so many as a rankings riser. And here we are. He's delivered already. Him going from 3 to 4, outside to inside the top 247, I don't see it slowing down. He deserves it. He's worked his butt off to get to this point. And again, I think this is someone who Oklahoma went and got for good reason. And it's another strong indicator that this staff is on the right track.
Yeah, for Jaden, you've said it before, but always go back to that IMG game that was nationally televised the night that David Stone committed. That was his introduction to a lot of OU fans. I think OU fans that night left with two big takeaways. Holy crap, we got David Stone. He's awesome. But then also, man, Jaden Jackson is disruptive. And he felt at the time like, probably not going to be a 3-star for long. And like you said, it was just like a foregone conclusion for so long that he'll rise. He'll rise, give it time. And he did. So up to a 4-star there. So Oklahoma, like you said, the big thing, every defensive line guy in the class is a 4-star or better. That's how you get it done. That's how you get things done in the SEC, especially too. That's what Oklahoma fans hope for with Todd Bates and obviously Miguel Chavis and this, defensive staff with Brent Venables. That's what you hope for, and that's what they got in this 24 class. What about elsewhere in the class? What are some other guys they're chasing here? Kind of an update on just this 24 group that's kind of starting to round into form. Signing days kind of creeping up around the corner a little bit. It was kind of an overall update on this 24 class that Oklahoma's still chasing some guys on.
Yeah, so there's a lot to dive into here again. So I apologize at home if it feels like I'm rambling, but so many data points, right, with all these discussions. So I'll lead it off with this to sort of tie in the rankings discussion, Josh. I do feel like it's somewhat important to mention off the top a guy who became a brand new 5-star in the cycle, Jordan Seaton, the offensive tackle at IMG Academy, where Jaden Jackson and David Stone are. He earns his 5th star. I believe he's now number 31. And again, another reminder on the rankings, there are 32 5-stars in every class because it reflects 32 first-round NFL draft picks. We're not ranking these guys based on their collegiate production or success. These rankings are a reflection of how we feel they're going to be drafted once upon a time into the NFL when they realize their full potential and head to the professional level. So Seaton earns his 5th star. I believe it's deservedly so. I mean, we talked about it, I think, several weeks ago, but when I was out there to see IMG Academy at Lipscomb Academy in Nashville, I think there was another big takeaway. Jaden Jackson's going to go up. David Stone's still really good. And by the way, David remained 5-star. He's number 17 in the cycle. But Jordan Seaton had one of the best games I've ever seen from an offensive lineman person. And I've seen some pretty darn good offensive linemen covering recruiting at the high school level. I think we all have in the recruiting space, right? You see these 6'7" kids at 15 years old, and you're like, how the hell are they doing this? But Seaton earning his 5th star is more than notable. Why do I bring that up? He obviously did not make his OU official visit. It was scheduled for the Iowa State game. He instead went to Tennessee on an unofficial. I think from there, a lot of Oklahoma fans were like, all right, go ahead and mail it in. And I get that. All I would say is that guy earning his 5th star is big because OU's still pursuing him for good reason. And that was sort of tangible evidence as to why Oklahoma is trying to reschedule a visit with him. And I know in talking to sources, he really wants to get to Norman still. So worth noting there. From there, let's still talk some offensive line, right? Everyone wants to talk about Grant Brix and Eddie Pierre-Louis. I'll just say this really quick. Oklahoma's trending in a very positive direction with both. From people I talked to, there is an expectation that both of those guys could make a decision within the next week to 2 weeks. I still think that a lot of schools are keeping a watchful eye on both. And these have both kind of been wild cards, right? I mean, it feels like time and again, behind the scenes, there has been an expectation level more than once for both of these guys that they were about to shut things down and it just didn't happen.
Sure.
So I think from here forward, we record on this Thursday, if you see Grant Brix or Eddie Pierre-Louis make the call over the next 3 to 7 days, don't be caught off guard. And if that is the case, I have reason to believe it would go in Oklahoma's favor. Now, I feel like it's also worth mentioning because of that wild card effect, they still haven't been played yet, and I could see them holding their cards close to the chest still. I think Nebraska still really wants Grant Brix, and they're going to push, especially with this latest development. From what I've heard, the Cornhuskers are now trying to counteract that momentum. And look, time and again, like Oklahoma, as I've noted on the board, I've been told they take a lead, and then Nebraska punches up. I don't buy K-State necessarily up there with Nebraska or Oklahoma anymore. Wildcats are kind of on the outside looking in, but Nebraska has kind of that quote-unquote home field advantage. They're like an hour or something away from his small town home in Iowa. They have done a really good job of recruiting him. So I do think that if Grant and Briggs were to make a decision over the next 3 to 7 days, it would go in OU's direction, but Nebraska is going to try and make that not the case. So stay tuned there. Eddie Pierre-Louis, I am a lot more confident there on the Oklahoma side of the equation. I have a crystal ball in. So if he is another one who makes the call soon, expect that to go in Oklahoma's direction. And then finally, on the 24/7 Sports Network and its YouTube channel, you heard it here first on the show, Michael Boganowski getting ready to make his decision live. He will be on the College Football Recruiting Show at around 4 p.m. Central. So I think by the time the show comes out, that should be like an hour or something away from when he's going live. I'm not going to dive into that just yet. We'll probably talk about that next week because, again, he's got to reveal his decision live on our airwaves. But head to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel around 4 p.m. Central. Tune in. Our national team does a great job of putting that show together. Boganowski will go live, and I have reason to believe, let me put it this way, you might see a familiar face following that announcement. So we'll see what happens, but tune in on the YouTube channel. It'll be a lot of fun, and Michael Boganowski still looks like Oklahoma's trending in a positive direction.
Yeah, no, Boganowski, the next one up. Obviously, no sense in getting too deep into the weeds this show. By the time it comes out, he'll either be just about to announce or already have announced for the lion's share of you guys tuning in and listening. So if you want more info on Boganowski, mosey on over, Oklahoma.247sports.com, Sooners Illustrated. We'll have more details there. And, yeah, like Collin said, we'll probably talk about it a little more in depth on the shows next week as they hopefully, it looks like, probably, maybe, we'll see, bring him into the fold in that 24 class. Look into this weekend a little bit. Last thing on the recruiting side before we get into the actual game. So they're back at home. First home game since the first time they played, period. But obviously, first home game since the Texas game. That big moment we talked about it coming out, what that could do for you in recruiting to have a moment like that, a game like that. Now trying to capitalize on that momentum going into this weekend. It is an 11 a.m. game, which is always a little bit tougher to get guys into town for. Nothing that OU is not used to at this point in the Big 12. A lot of 11 a.m. games this year, more to come as we go along. What are some names that Oklahoma fans should be aware of going into this weekend that will be making their way to the stadium as Oklahoma homecoming weekend gets back to it and resumes the back half of their season?
Yeah, so this is going to be a pretty busy weekend for Oklahoma on the recruiting side. I'll lead off with this. I know a lot of people are curious as to what everything has looked like behind the scenes following Oklahoma's big win in the Red River rivalry. And I can tell you this with 100% certainty, that win has catapulted Oklahoma's recruiting momentum. I don't know of another way around it. Everyone who I've talked to on the recruiting trail, from coaches and trainers to recruits themselves, obviously I was out at 3 games over the weekend during the bye. They all talked about how awesome it was to watch Oklahoma win that game. And so now here they are. I think Oklahoma has a legitimate shot to capitalize on that momentum and surge in the second half of the season, not only towards a Big 12 championship appearance, potentially a college football playoff, but this year legitimately feels like a time where they can take even further steps towards a positive recruiting group heading into the SEC. So with this UCF game, I'm not going to dive into everyone who's going to be there because that would take me like an hour and a half. But I think the 2 big storylines I'm keeping an eye on, we talked about Michael Boganowski. So Reggie Powers and Cameron Campbell, 2 former Michigan State defensive back commits. One's a safety, the other is a corner. They are still scheduled to be on campus in Norman this weekend. Why is that notable? Well, obviously OU is at 24 commits, 25 commits. If Boganowski joins the group, then you're really starting to get into that, okay, we've kind of hit that 25 benchmark. There is no cap like there used to be.
Right.
But because you've hit 25, you're now getting into scholarship reworking territory. And with Powers and Campbell coming on campus, I've been told that these are both individuals that Oklahoma still really wants. They feel like these are both safety corner types who can help them in the SEC. There's a level of physicality and overall talent that I think OU staff appreciates there with both. So I have been told whichever way Boganowski's decision goes, Oklahoma is going to be willing to work some things through in order to try to land these guys. But again, both of these individuals and Powers and Campbell will be seeing an Oklahoma game for, I believe, the first time. This is going to be their opportunity to essentially have that final pitch before a potential decision. I'm pretty stunned if they are able to make it out to Oklahoma again prior to a decision date. So something to follow there, because in 2024, yes, you're getting pretty heavy in terms of commit numbers, but there are still a lot of guys, especially after that Red River win and heading into the second half of the season, who are out there for the taking and more than interested. So Powers and Campbell, two individuals who I'm keeping a close eye on as they arrive in Norman for the UCF game. Then in 2025, so there's a ton of 2025 cats, right, who are probably going to be there. The one thing I think Oklahoma fans should be interested in that I feel is kind of storylining, for lack of a better term. I talked to Jonah Williams, the 5-star safety linebacker hybrid, over the weekend. Went down to Houston to go see him, chopped it up with him for a little while. You can go read that full interview at Sooners Illustrated. Get a subscription for $1. I think it's pretty well worth it. Our team's doing a great job going to the second half of the year, but I would say it's going to be worth it to keep track of what happens, because he told me OU is still very much in good position with him. He's been very impressed with the way Oklahoma's looked defensively. He wants to play in that back end. He feels like Brent's next star, bigger safety linebacker hybrid type, if they're able to get him. And the big if here is if he shows up for that UCF game, Josh, I think Oklahoma's cooking. I mean, I think Brandon Hall, do we talk about how good this guy is enough? I don't know. But he is killing it in this recruitment. Jonah Williams loved what he saw in that OU-Texas game. He liked that the safeties were not only playing at a high level, but guys like Peyton Bowen were playing early on. But if he shows up, I think Oklahoma continues to jump. If he doesn't show up, then he would likely be at Ohio State this weekend, which, if you know what's going on in college football, Ohio State's hosting Penn State in arguably the biggest game of the weekend coming up. Ohio State's been in contact with Jonah more and more. He told me it really picked up. Like, they've been really trying to get him on campus since that Notre Dame game when they got the win. So the Buckeyes are trying to surge here with Jonah. And again, as we record on this Thursday, I haven't dove back into what's going on there. I'll probably touch base with them. But essentially, going into the weekend, Oklahoma, Ohio State, both with big weekends in their own ways, trying to see if Jonah Williams shows up on their respective campuses. So those are some storylines to follow recruiting-wise as we get into essentially the start of the second half of the season.
Yeah, sounds like it'll be another packed sidelines during warm-ups. Trying to navigate your way around the sidelines at Gaylord Family Oakland Memorial Stadium during, especially the beginning of the game, during warm-ups, it's borderline impossible. It's a tight sidelines. You're trying to get some warm-up shots or whatever. It really can't be done. And it sounds like it's going to be like that again this weekend. Like we said, going to be great weather and things like that. It is homecoming, which I know is kind of like OU doesn't really care about homecoming that much, but it does add a little extra juice to it, a little extra kind of fan festivities, things like that. So it should be a fun weekend in Norman. Looking forward to it. Excited to see this team play again. And on that note, before you go, Collin, I do want to get your thoughts on the game as always. Sooners are pretty healthy favorites here, 18-point favorite. UCF hasn't won a Big 12 game yet. It's been kind of hard to know what to make of them because John Reese Plumlee has been out. He's back now, according to Gus Malzahn. He's going to play this weekend, so that does give them an extra little wrinkle. You got to imagine Malzahn's going to bust out all the pull out all the stops as he normally does in these kind of spots, maybe get some trickeration, things like that. What are some things you're watching for this weekend? What's your read on this game, and how do you feel like it goes down when the Knights and the Sooners match up on Saturday?
Yeah, I'm excited to see some eye discipline here, right? I think Oklahoma's defense, as we know, is a aggressively based system. There's a lot of stunts, twists, varying linebacker pressures, simulated pressures. Brent Venables likes to mix it up. So does Gus Malzahn. If you know anything, I mean, as much as we joke that it's the putt-putt offense that Gus runs, he's going to try and trick you, and he wants to make you double check yourself a little bit. So kind of that chess match is really what I'm looking forward to. I really like Gus's system. It's not, always the most explosive or whatever, but it challenges you. And when they start driving, they not only have the ability to make you think, but they have the ability to make you fatigued, which then obviously triggers further mistakes from a mentality perspective. I want to see how the defense handles that. And then from there, I want to see what Oklahoma changes offensively, right? This is the opportunity for you to, out of the bye week, what have you worked on? What's going to be different? Josh, one thing I want to mention, I thought it was, I don't want to say profound because that sounds a little ridiculous, but I thought it was very interesting. I think Brent Venables was talking with Bob Stoops at selloutcrowd.com and their podcast. And Brent mentioned that in his interview with Bob, like one thing we challenged ourselves with as a staff is self-scouting. What are our tendencies? What are we putting on tape that opponents are going to look at and try to counter? So essentially what Brent's telling you in that interview, and I encourage you all to go look at it at selloutcrowd.com and their YouTube channel, I think. He's basically saying, we spent the whole bye week trying to look different. So how different do you look? Does that mean different personnel groupings, different calls, different like what are we going to see from OU offensively, especially? Because I don't know that there's a ton you can change defensively, right? Maybe I'll be wrong, but I think offensively, especially from the stuff at running back to the offensive line, the wide receiver shuffling now with Andrew Anthony, what do you look like? How different is that? And now how does that make opponents react in the second half of the season? I think UCF is first up in trying to counter Brent Venables and Jeff Lebby, who apparently spent the last week trying to build out different looks for the rest of the way. But yeah, for me, I don't see Oklahoma struggling a ton. You would assume with rest and further prep, they're able to give UCF a completely different look. I mean, as much as we talk about, obviously, Dylan Gabriel and Jeff Lebby basically being UCF products, I don't anticipate a ton of advantages there because of all the turnover. But, yeah, I think Oklahoma wins pretty handily. I would expect a cover. If I had to give you an official final score or whatever, give me like 41-17. So maybe 41-21. Like, I still think they could win by 3 touchdowns or more.
Yeah,
I could easily see a game where they run away with it. But long story short, lots of advantages for Oklahoma, especially asking an East Coast team to travel into town and play that morning kick, so on and so forth. So, yeah, I think Oklahoma has a chance to continue to put their best foot forward in this matchup.
Right. 41-17 or 41-21?
Let's go 41-17. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling – because the other one, too, is like – I reached out to some people real quick, Josh. Like, yes, JRP is back. I don't think he's 100% either. And I would say that directly impacts the game. So, give me 41-17.
Sure, absolutely. We're all trying to get back on track after the Texas debacle. 41-17, you got Oklahoma winning and covering. Tom, James, and myself will give our picks here at the very end of the show. CK, appreciate you as always, man. We'll be looking to catch up with you next week. And again, everybody, flip over to Oklahoma.247sports.com, Sooners Illustrated, for more on Michael Boganowski. He makes his announcement official, his commitment this afternoon. Collin, appreciate you, sir. We'll talk to you next week.
Everyone be safe, subscribe, and I will see you next week.
All right, we now welcome in Tom Green, James D. Jackson. Gentlemen, excited to get back down to Norman and see OU play a football game again. What a concept.
Yeah. Feels like it's been forever. Feels like it's been forever since we covered the game. I mean, I know it's just been a week and a half, but it's been a while.
Yeah,
Just ready to see some football, man. When you have such a team that's this good right now, you kind of want to see it, see it happen again. And that's the situation right now. Is you keep it up back half of the season.
Yeah, and for me personally, it's felt like even longer because I didn't really watch much football during the bye week. I caught like the last few minutes of the Oregon Washington game, but that's about it.
Right. No, yeah, that's kind of been the theme of this whole week leading up to this game. Was just kind of like it. Just the Texas game just feels so long ago, and I guess there was so much talking about it afterward, and rightfully so. Such a huge win. All the national shows are talking about it, so I've kind of taken it all in. It's kind of like that's the last time they played. It feels like so long ago. So excited to see them play this weekend. OU-UCF, Saturday morning, 11 a.m. It's an ABC joint. So get your affairs in order on that front. Oklahoma's a pretty solid favorite, 18 at last check. This is actually the first time they've ever played Sooners and UCF. Kind of a fun little wrinkle on the way out for Oklahoma in their last year in the Big 12. Guys, we talked about the game a little bit on Monday. Obviously, UCF has been without their quarterback, John Reese Plumlee. He's back this weekend. So they're kind of a hard team to know how to get a total read on. They haven't won a conference game yet. They obviously blew that huge lead against Baylor. They've done some nice things. They've got kind of a weird defense statistically. Just kind of overall your feeling going into this game, because it feels like Oklahoma is rightfully a heavy favorite, but also like there's a path to UCF making this a game. How do you guys kind of feel just about how heavy a favorite Oklahoma is this weekend, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it? Because it feels like it's kind of hard to know what to make of it in terms of UCF's actual chances to pull this off in Norman this weekend.
Yeah, I would say, I think OU is a very big favorite in this one. I don't see it being a close game here in a lot of situations. I know you talked about UCF and their struggles in the conference games. I know we asked Coach Brent Venables about that, when he kind of moved over from the Big 12 to the ACC when he went to Clemson. And he was just like talking about how you kind of have to, get a gauge for how things work with the opponents you're playing now. You got to understand the new guys. And that's pretty much where he sees UCF right now. And I don't think they haven't won a game in the Big 12 yet. I don't think they're going to take down the top dog of the Big 12 for the last couple of years. I don't think that's going to happen either. So that's why I'm pretty comfortable where OU is at. And OU's been playing incredible football over the last 6 games. Just outstanding. And that's why they're as high as they are now in the national ratings. I think it'll be a big game for OU.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma's going to take this one pretty handily. The UCF, I just don't think they have the firepower to really keep up with this Oklahoma offense right now. Getting John Reese Plumlee back is obviously huge. He's missed essentially the last 4 games for them. Missed 3. He started the Kansas game, but was clearly still limited and had to be pulled. But he's back 100%, so that should give them a little bit of a confidence boost coming in. But this team is just, I don't know. It's weird. Like they've not won a Big 12 game yet. We saw what they did in that Baylor game. I don't know. I just don't think they have, enough to take down what is the top team in the conference right now, like James was saying. And we'll get into a little bit more of their offense and defense, but it's just this matchup. I think it just favors Oklahoma too heavily for there to really be any questions. And I think Oklahoma, obviously coming off the big Texas win, they've gotten a lot more attention. It seems like, just by the nature of them having a bye week last week, people have been talking about that Texas game for the better part of 2 weeks now. But internally, it seems like Oklahoma, the guys are answering questions still lingering about that game and the after effects of it. But internally, I think it was might have been Kendall Dolby on Monday when we spoke to him. It was Nick Anderson. It's like, yeah, Sunday we shut that down. We had our 24 hours to celebrate, and then it's like, okay, what are we doing to fix the mistakes we made in that game? What are they doing to, just kind of do some self-assessment of over the first 6 weeks overall and move on to the second half of the season, focusing on the task at hand and not kind of letting that Texas game kind of carry over and be like, oh yeah, I can just coast on their laurels right now. They know that they
yes, the Texas win was big, but they haven't necessarily proven anything. They still have 6 games left on the schedule to accomplish their goals.
Yeah, and Denny Sussman was saying the same thing as Nick Anderson was saying. It's pretty much we're getting ready for UCF now. They kind of just have to answer the questions that we ask. So there's still some here, Texas talk and things like that. But they're ready for UCF. We talked about Plumlee coming back, and I know that they haven't really had him for their conference game. So that's the kind of the wrinkle that you see. But it seemed like Coach Venables and Danny Stutzman and all the guys are kind of already familiar with what his skill sets are. So they know what he's going to bring. So it's not like going to be a shock to have him back in the lineup, I think. And I think that'll prove well for OU.
Yeah, John Reese Plumlee, it's interesting. He's obviously a very talented athlete, very dynamic runner. He's got like 2,200 rushing yards for his career between Ole Miss and UCF, 24 rushing touchdowns. He's a two-sport guy. He played baseball at both Ole Miss and UCF. So he can do different things, but he's probably a better runner than he is a passer, especially against Power 5 competition, I think, for his career. Because obviously, he spent time at UCF and, this is their first year in the Big 12 and he's missed most of their games there. But from his time at Ole Miss and the limited time that he's, played Power 5 teams and out of conference action before and bowl games, he's only completing like 55% of his passes, has more interceptions than touchdowns against Power 5 teams, is averaging like 4.5, 5 yards per pass attempt. So he's not put up very good passing numbers against better competition. And now he's coming off a pretty prolonged layoff. How is he going to respond to that? And I just think that plays into what Oklahoma's advantage is right now.
And it's a leg injury too. I mean, it's coming off of that, and it's kind of trying to come out and run on that against this Oklahoma defense is really good at stopping the run. I mean, it's a difficult task for sure.
Yeah. Now, Plumlee's health and just kind of overall how he handles the crowd and just kind of all that is kind of one of those X factors in the game that's hard to know exactly how it will go. I mentioned it on Monday a little bit. I think the bye week helps a lot with not having any sort of a Texas hangover. But this stat, shout out Mike Halk and the OU Sports Information stats, kind of making the rounds this week. Not that it's that surprising because Oklahoma doesn't lose that many games per year when you really think about it, but pretty amazing that since Bob Stoops took over in '99, I want to make sure I get it right, 23-1 in the game after the Texas game.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I mean, not too worried about a hangover here in this spot with the bye week and the team is all saying the right things, but almost any year, Oklahoma has actually done a phenomenal job in not letting that game linger, whether it goes positively or poorly or negatively. They've come back the next game and obviously the vast majority of the time they take care of business. So not a lot of reasons I think that are valid to be concerned with any sort of a hangover. Just bye week, this team seems to have said all the right things. That stat, I mean, that seems like a narrative that just isn't going to really apply here. And the Sooners are going to be ready to go when this game rolls around on Saturday.
Yeah, and I wrote a full article based on that stat just because I heard about the post-Texas letdown situation. I know it's not necessarily always about OU losing. It's just coming out sluggish, not being, assertive enough and look the best they can. And I know some people are still worried about that, but you look at the record. I mean, winning is what matters the most. I mean, 23-1. You should feel comfortable with that statistic. And even Brent Venables, after last year's Texas game, they won the game afterwards as well. So you look forward to what OU's done, and Brent Venables should be able to carry that on.
Yeah, and I think this defense is going to just set the tone. Those guys seem pretty juiced after that Texas game. And really, it's we talked about John Reese Plumlee, but this UCF offense is kind of interesting. They're third in the nation in rushing. That's kind of a Gus Malzahn staple, which is it's interesting because Gus Malzahn, you hear hurry up, no huddle offense, and you think it's going to be a high powered passing attack, but really the strength of all of his teams over the years have been the run game. Like it is a run based scheme. Like that year at Auburn, his first year when they went to the national championship game, and they really unlocked something with Nick Marshall at quarterback. They had the game against Tennessee where they attempted like 9 or 11 passes. Like they were just like, we're just going to run the ball until you stop us. And most teams couldn't. But right now averaging like 240 yards a game, something like that. Yeah, 245 yards a game.
Yeah, something like
6
that.
yards per carry. They got 2 running backs over 400 yards right now in the season. One of them's at 511 yards with 6 touchdowns. He's averaging like 6 yards a carry. The other one's at 440 yards, and he's averaging like 8 yards a carry. And then you have John Reese Plumlee coming back, and he can obviously move. We'll see what he looks like coming off that leg injury. But it's just, really interesting because, Oklahoma's run defense has been very good this year. So it's kind of, strength against strength in that regard. Whereas, UCF, 96 nationally in pass attempts per game. For reference, Oklahoma's 33rd, so obviously a little bit more pass-happy offense there.
Sure.
So it's just going to be kind of interesting to see how UCF tries to attack this Oklahoma defense that is, been playing out of its mind for the most part through these first, 6 games. Obviously, much improved from where they were last year, and yeah, I just think it's going to be interesting to see how they attack that and what kind of tricks Gus Malzahn has up his sleeves, because he is very well known for having a deep bag of tricks.
Sure.
Brent Venables talked about it this week. He's seen some firsthand from his time at Clemson, going head-to-head with Auburn a couple times. But they have all sorts of tricks. They do some double passes. They do the Wildcat. I mean, Gus Malzahn was the offensive coordinator at Arkansas when, Darren McFadden was running wild on people. They've got some plays that, we saw SMU run because Rhett Lashley comes off that same Gus Malzahn tree. And Oklahoma sniffed that one out pretty good. But there's been some other teams that have tried trick plays against Oklahoma this year too. Texas obviously had a couple on that second drive, a fake punt, and then the halfback pass out of the Wildcat. But yeah, so it's not something that, Oklahoma isn't prepared for. It's not something they haven't seen. They know they have to rep it a little bit more this week. But if you're relying on trick plays to win a game on the road like this, it's probably not going to work out for, the visiting team.
Yeah, it seems like everybody, like Andy Stutzman and Coach Venables, they're already getting ready for that rushing attack. I mean, they've talked about that and how good, UCF has been, and they know about the trick plays. Andy Stutzman said they practice it all the time, kind of just like surprise them with a trick play, and they have to react during practice. And I mean, that's what they do. So they're pretty used to it. There's a whole file of video that they have of trick plays that they go over. And things like that. So they're pretty prepared, I think, for any situation that UCF's going to bring.
Yeah, and Gus has been running a lot of these trick plays since his high school coaching days in Arkansas, 30 years ago. So it's not like, they're new. It's just about staying disciplined.
Execution, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, it's about staying disciplined, like, keeping your eyes focused, not getting fooled by any of the, pre-snap candy, and just, reading your keys and staying disciplined. I mean, we've seen Oklahoma do that. Obviously Danny Stutzman sniffed out that trick play against SMU. Rondell Bothroyd had a big stop on a jet sweep against Texas last week. But then they've also had a couple busts, like that fake punt that Texas ran,
Sure.
the Wildcat pass. But it's just about discipline and, cleaning up those things. And I think having that week off to kind of address some of those areas that, hey, maybe you had a little lapse in thinking here in real time, that, they're going to be more well prepared for it this week, I think.
Yeah, no, that UCF offensive line, sneaky good on the midseason watch list for the Joe Moore Award, which is getting out to the best offensive line in the country. There's only like 20 or something offensive lines on there. They're included. Yeah. And so they got it, like it's been brought up a lot, but number 3 in the country in rushing yards per game. I mean, that you don't stumble into that 6 games in. You got to be able to run the ball to get to that. And that's with Plumlee missing time. And he's a guy who can use his legs to extend plays and make things happen. We saw Oklahoma do well against that, with Emory Jones. Quinn Ewers certainly can move around with his legs as well. So they've seen it, and so they should be a little more ready for it. But yeah, that UCF offense versus Oklahoma defense is kind of the fun side of the ball in this one, because it boils down to kind of the head coaching matchup with Brent Venables and Gus Malzahn. Obviously, Tom, this is your account. You've talked about it already. You know Gus very well. You covered him for a long time at Auburn. Just, I guess, kind of your read. I'm interested in terms of Venables versus Malzahn. Like, how do you kind of handicap that? They've gone against each other before, like you said, Auburn, Clemson battles. I'm kind of excited to see that chess match of two guys who've coached a long time, They're really good at that side of the ball, their respective sides of the ball. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to watch that battle. These are two guys who've had a lot of success kind of going toe-to-toe this weekend.
Yeah, and if I'm handicapping this, I think Brent Venables definitely has the advantage, certainly just from a talent standpoint.
Sure.
Whereas, you're at Clemson and Auburn, he still had the talent advantage there because you look at those Clemson defenses. That's when, Isaiah Simmons, Dexter Lawrence, all those guys, they were there. But Auburn was still recruiting at a top 10 level at that time. So they had a little bit more comparable. But you look at their two meetings in 2016 and 2017, that 2017 game in particular still is, I believe, the worst offensive game of Gus Malzahn's career. Well, at Auburn, at least, it was the worst offensive game of his career. They had 140 total yards, averaged less than 2 yards per play. Jared Stidham got sacked 11 times in that game. They just could not do anything against that Clemson defense. And that was an Auburn team that, if you remember, they knocked off number 1 Georgia, number 1 Alabama in basically a 3-week span at the end of the season to win the SEC West and came within a SEC championship game win of the playoff. So it was a good Auburn team, but that Clemson team was just steamrolling on defense.
Sure.
So again, I think Brent Venables, obviously they have some familiarity with each other. I think he's going to have the advantage. He's really kind of wrangled that offense both times they've gone head to head. And then, you think about it, Ted Roof was the defense coordinator at Auburn when Gus Malzahn was the offense coordinator there for the national championship team. He's got familiarity there. Brandon Hall was an analyst at Auburn when Gus Malzahn was head coach. There are guys on this defensive staff who are well-versed in what Gus Malzahn does offensively. Mm-hmm. So I think they're going to have those guys very well prepared. They're not going to be surprised by anything they see. And I think Oklahoma, just with the way this defense has been playing through the first half of the season and the talent advantage they have, I think they should, there's a reason they're favored by almost 3 touchdowns.
Right. The talent gap is, UCF's a team that's making a transition from G5 to Power 5. It's going to take a little time. All the new teams in the Big 12 this year have all really struggled to get wins so far. It's hard to make that jump. It's hard. And UCF's kind of finding that out right now. So this weekend is homecoming weekend, but it's also reunion weekend for Ted Roof and Gus Malzahn, Brandon Hall, and, of course, Tom Green and Gus Malzahn, the big headline of the weekend.
And Dylan Gabriel and Jeff Levy.
Absolutely. Dylan Gabriel and Jeff Levy going against UCF, which will be a fun little wrinkle as well. We're looking at that side of it, Oklahoma's offense against UCF's defense. Like you said, it is, I don't know how Dylan Gabriel and Jeff Levy feel about UCF. I don't think there'd be any reason to have any disdain. Obviously, Gabriel got hurt that last year, which was coached by Gus Malzahn, and then decided to leave, looking for a better opportunity, got it with UCLA, and then obviously pivoted on UCLA and then going to Oklahoma instead. Jeff Levy was there before, back in the day, coaching, obviously, Dylan Gabriel. That's been well documented. So they get to go against their former team. This UCF defense is weird because they're 83rd in scoring, so below average, but they're top 30 in pass defense. So what does that tell you? They stink at defending the run, really bad. 120th in the country in rushing yards allowed per game. You can run the ball on them. Now, obviously, Oklahoma hasn't ran the ball. So kind of all these little, the matchup is kind of interesting on paper because seemingly if Oklahoma was going to get the run game going, this would be the time to do it. What sticks out when looking at that matchup for you guys, Oklahoma's offense versus UCF's defense?
Real quick before we get to that, I just want to backpedal to what you're saying. Don't know how Dylan Gabriel and Jeff Levy feel about UCF.
Yeah, right.
Call this one a tease. I'll have a story tomorrow on this reunion of sorts for Dylan Gabriel. I spoke to his mom Dory this week, and
Dylan Gabriel's mom.
Dylan Gabriel's mom. She had a great quote about what it's going to be like for Dylan, because obviously Dylan's downplayed it a little bit. He doesn't want to make this week about himself. It's about the team going 1-0, all that. He's saying all the right things. But his mom said, it's like going to the prom and seeing your old girlfriend there. I feel like you're still sweet on each other, but it's a little different. Life has changed you, and you smile, but it's not feeling like home anymore.
That's like some Emily Dickinson or
something. I was like, what's going on here? She's a writer, man.
Well,
it's funny. When she told me that, I mentioned to her, I don't know if you remember, but when we talked to Dylan, I guess it was in August after one practice, he was talking about the difference between this year at Oklahoma and last year is like, last year is like you just started dating a new girl, still trying to get to know each other. And now you're, a year into the relationship, you're feeling more comfortable, know each other a little bit better. So clearly he's his mother's son.
Yeah. See where he gets it.
But yeah, so be on the lookout for that story tomorrow on Sooners Illustrated. But yeah, I mean, clearly it's going to be a homecoming of sorts for Dylan. Levy too, he spent 2 years there, one with Dylan. Obviously, he's spent a lot of time with Josh Heupel, former Oklahoma quarterbacks, now at head coach of Tennessee. Very grateful for the opportunities that Heupel, gave him, and because he worked with Heupel, when Levy was at school here and was a GA. Like they've known each other for a long time. Deep respect there. But yeah, it's going to be interesting for those two guys because obviously, like you said, things kind of come full circle for them 5 years later.
Sure.
But yeah, Oklahoma's offense. Going to be interesting to see how they handle the run. They have not been great about that. We saw Dylan Gabriel. I mean, he's developed more and more as a running threat this season, and that kind of culminated in that Texas game. Ran for over 100 yards. Curious to see if they're going to keep leaning on him or, Tawee Walker and Marcus Major going to keep carrying the load. Brent Venables said this week they're hopeful that, Javonte Barnes could kind of get back into action at some point in the second half of the season, but I'm not going to count on that, especially this week. But, is a guy like Gavin Sawchuk going to see more action now? Just real interested to see kind of how they carry over after that Texas game.
I know we talked about the run game, and I think a good question that OU can kind of answer this week is the offensive line and who's going to be where now. I mean, we got to handle some injuries here and there. So is Caleb Schaefer, Caden Green, where are they going to fit into this now? Are they going to get some more playing time like they did against Texas? And they did a pretty good job. Just where is that going to happen at? We look at the run game. I think we're at the point in the season where we know what this run game is. I don't think we're going to see any more surprises. This is what it is. So I think Dylan Gabriel is going to have to be that guy on the run side as well. I mean, unless they finally give Tawee Walker a full game to see how he is to set the premier back overall the entire time. Maybe that'll change things and he can kind of spark his runs on here and there. But the offensive line is a big question for me. Just seeing where are they at? Who's out there and how they're going to gel now as they get into the second half of this season.
Yeah, I think it's a safe bet to say that Caleb Schaefer is going to start at right guard. McCade Metoyer, injury looked really bad in real time against Texas. I mean, he had to get carted off the field. They had to put an air cast on. Turns out it's just a high ankle sprain. Brent Venables said, probably a week or two. We'll see what's going to happen with him. But Caleb Schaefer, came in final 9 plays. Obviously, was on there for the 5 most consequential plays of the game on that game-winning drive. And he's the only other offensive lineman that's taken a meaningful snap at right guard this season. I know Savion Byrd has some experience over there. Troy Everett can kind of play any of those 3 interior spots, but Caleb Schaefer, I think, is going to be the guy to fill in for McCade Metoyer for this next week or two. And he's an experienced guy. He played over 2,000 snaps at Miami, Ohio, started like 35 games out of the 41 he appeared in. Just kind of been waiting for his opportunity. He's played here and there. He didn't play a lot in that Texas game, but he delivered in the moment on that game-winning drive. So yeah, I'd expect him to step in at right guard. Left guard is a little bit more interesting to me because obviously Troy Everett got pulled in the first half there against Texas. Caden Green pretty much finished that game. He's a guy that started the season at tackle, was moved inside to guard. Is he going to get the start? Because Troy Everett, by all accounts, he's good to go. And Brent Venables said this week, Savion Byrd's going to be in the mix there too.
Yeah.
We haven't seen him since the Tulsa game when he got injured, in the first quarter, I think, like 12, 13 plays into it. Just really interested to see how things kind of shake out on the left side of the line there.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Caleb's pretty.
Savion Byrd thing. Sorry, James. I was going to say real quick. The Savion Byrd thing is weird. Yeah, because he was obviously the starter to start open the year. Had the weird Tulsa thing, which Brent Venables never was really clear on what exactly it was. It was something
on the broadcast. It seemed like something with his head.
Yeah. I mean, I saw him coming off. He was covering his eyes. I don't know if that means. My initial thought actually at the game was, oh, we got poked in the eye really bad. Now, obviously, I don't think that's what it actually ended up being. That's what it looked like to me in the moment. So, yeah, he was out, but then he's back, but he's not playing. Is it just he got Wally pipped, or is it he's not actually healthy? The Savion Bird thing is weird. And so I'm interested to see, with this kind of opening with McCade out for a little while, is this the opening to get Bird back into the mix? That if it was going to happen, this would be the time. If it comes out and it's Schaefer Everett to start this game, that's probably an indication of the way things are moving going forward as far as Savion Bird getting a lot of playing time. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about the injury of McCade, and it seemed very serious just because of how, like, Tyler Guyton and other guys reacted on the field.
It looked bad. Yeah.
Like, Tyler Guyton was jumping and telling the medical staff to come over as quickly as possible. And so you think, okay, that's a serious situation. Then the cast comes out, the cart comes out. It was a crazy situation. So just having high ankle sprain is actually, given everything that happened, that's a pretty good situation to be in. It looked a lot worse than it was.
And they seemed a lot more optimistic, like, after the game.
They
was out there on the field celebrating with them. I asked Andrew Raym, he's like, "Oh yeah, it was a lot better news than we all thought because it looked very serious."
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like in the moment, being on the field and kind of seeing some of the gestures and stuff like that, there was some thought we were talking, other guys on the field were like, he broke something. Like, that's how it felt. And so the fact that he's, all for the most part fine, he's gonna be back this season is a huge dub for him and the team.
I'm actually curious to see what it looked like now because we were up in the press box, we can't see exactly, like, what did you actually see? Like, did it look broken? It's like, man,
I will say he was carted off.
It's incredible.
Which it's crazy because when we were out there Tuesday after practice waiting to talk to players, we see players walking off the field at the end of the day. McCade Matoya was walking fine. Didn't even look like he had a brace or anything on his ankle.
Right.
Like, I'm sure it was taped like, they normally are under their socks and their cleats and all that. But he was walking fine, wasn't wearing a boot, didn't have a giant brace on. It's like, man, like, what kind of, like, Wolverine, like, healing powers does this guy have?
That's what he is. That should be his nickname from now on, Wolverine. That's good.
He does have a bit of he's kind of got more of a Thor look with the hair, but Wolverine works too.
Yeah.
So any other things in this game? Obviously, final thoughts. We'll get the picks here in a sec. It should be a game where Oklahoma's going to be a big favorite, and they are, and it's a weird game, but one that Oklahoma should be okay in. Is that kind of the general feel that we have here? Final thoughts here on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think UCF can make it interesting early on, but I think Oklahoma just, by the middle of the second quarter, third quarter, they're just going to pull away. Again, we've talked about how good they've been in the middle eight and kind of capitalizing off that. They create separation right there in the middle of the game, but I think that'll help them put it away. But I think that they'll be in control of this game by the second quarter.
Yeah, I mean, I think OU is pretty motivated now. They're top 5 in the nation, top 5 in the nation, and they want to get in that. Top 6. Yeah, they want to get in that top 4, so they kind of have to have a couple of statement wins here against teams that they're going to be favored against the rest of the season. So they have to come out early and beat down on their opponent like they did earlier in the season. Not necessarily to the Arkansas State type of situation, but a really big win for them. And I think that's what they're motivated to get to now.
Oklahoma and Penn State, the only 2 teams in the country 6-0 against the spread. Kind of wild so far this year. All right, let's lock in the picks. Oklahoma UCF this weekend. 18-point favorite for Oklahoma as it sits right now. Over-unders at 66. Now, of course, we're all looking to bounce back. We had the Texas debacle. We're all trying to get back on track. Now, James and I, the 3 of us, all had Oklahoma covering the number. So we're actually still, James and I, undefeated against the spread. Tom had the SMU loss. Now Colin's gotten dinged. So James and I are 6-0. Tom and Collin are 5-1 against the spread. We're all 5-1 straight up because we had Oklahoma losing to Texas. So let's lock in the picks. Collin had 41-17. Tom.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in line here with Collin. I think Oklahoma's going to score a little bit more. I'm going to go with 45-17. Not a lot more, but they got a field goal in there. 45-17. Like I said, I think the talent gap from Oklahoma to UCF is going to be too much, and I don't think that just the familiarity that the defensive staff has with Gus Malzahn's offense, between Brent Venables facing him, between Ted Roof working with him, between Brandon Hall coming up, under Gus Malzahn. I just think they're not going to be caught off guard by anything, and I just don't think UCF has the firepower to make this a real threat for Oklahoma. They're just going to keep cruising into the second half of the season. They'll be 7-0. They're going to, next week we have the first college football playoff rankings coming out, so they know what's ahead of them. They have a chance to really position themselves for that playoff contention now.
Is that next week already?
Halloween, first one.
Oh my gosh. Crazy.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 41-13. I don't see a lot of touchdowns being scored by UCF in this one. I mean, it's just so hard to score against OU, especially when you get into the red zone. I mean, it's incredibly difficult. They've talked about playing to a standard, throughout the year, no matter who's in the game. And I think they're going to keep it up, especially at home, coming back and things like that. So I think 41-13 is the score here.
Yeah, I've had a hard time getting a read on Oklahoma's offense in particular in games like these. I've had them go big number, and they kind of look lethargic. I went the other way. I'm going to go big again, and we'll see how it goes.
They do the opposite of what you say, though, Josh. I don't know, man.
I'm going to go 51-16. I think Oklahoma puts a big number offensively. I just think Oklahoma – I mean, if Oklahoma could run the ball, and UCF, like we said, has not been able to run the ball, I think Oklahoma's passing game is just good enough to be able to throw on almost anybody, even with Angelo Anthony out. So I think Oklahoma puts up a lot of points. I'll say UCF gets a couple of Gus Malzahn trickerations and gets down the field and gets themselves into the red zone, but they've been so good about bend, don't break. So I'll say they get some field goals on the board, 51-16. I think Oklahoma wins pretty easily, dominate their way, and on to the next one.
How are you getting 51 in this one? Is it 42 and then 3 field goal? Is Oklahoma going to score 9 times, or is it going to be like 7 touchdowns and a safety?
Let's go 7 touchdowns and a safety. Let's have some fun with it.
Let's say more safety. It's crazy. All right.
Yeah, they're going to pin him deep. They're going to have a bounce back day punting. They're going to pin him inside the 5 at some point, whether it's Placer or Zinga. And then I'll say Bothroyd blows up Plumlee for a safety.
Oh, wow. I thought you were going to say Peyton Bowen, gets another punt block.
I almost thought about it. I was like, but 3 seems like a lot to ask.
You want to have a fun way to get to that 51?
Sure.
Peyton Bowen blocks an extra point attempt.
Oh.
Oklahoma returns it for the defensive 2-point conversion.
There you go.
Before happened 2 years ago against Nebraska. Pat Fields ran an extra point back.
Yeah, I remember that.
Quite a moment. I don't think probably the loudest that I heard the stadium as far as one individual play. Just the sudden change of holy crap, they're scoring points on the extra. People got really excited about that. It was kind of fun. All right, should be a fun one though. I'm excited to get back out there and actually see them play again. Oklahoma UCF Saturday morning at 11. We're all going to be there, of course, in Norman. Should be a beautiful day weather-wise and homecoming. So it should be just a good overall day down there in Norman. Be sure to keep up with the site, oklahoma.247sports.com. And there's so much there. We already do have a lot leading up to this game. More to come. And, of course, game day, your place to be is the site. Message boards, my VIP subscriber. Hang out in the game thread. Lots of post-game reaction. And then on the YouTube channel, hear from Brent Venables, players, obviously us, full reaction of the game after it's over on Saturday evening, Oklahoma and UCF. So we'll see you then. Until Saturday from Norman, for Tom Green, James D. Jackson, Collin Kennedy earlier, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll see you guys Monday for the next edition of the Sooners Illustrated podcast.
See you.